Alrighty. So we can start the orientation now and talk a little bit about FrogWatch, what your participation in that looks like, the goals of the program, and learn a little more about some of the animals we might see. All right. So the agenda for tonight, we're going to talk about what is FrogWatch. We're going to talk about the monitoring protocols. We're going to go over the data submission process. We're going to learn the calls of the some of the species we're going to probably hear, and then we'll have time at the end for questions. In addition to that, if any questions pop up during the presentation, please feel free to hit the raise hand button and we will do our best to answer any questions. Sound good? All right. So, what is FrogWatch? FrogWatch is a citizen science program. It was established in 1998, basically to help people learn about wetlands and to help monitor frog and toad populations. So, why do we care about frog populations? There's a couple reasons. So, one, frogs are a very important indicator species. They are a great sign of a healthy or sometimes unhealthy environment. So, monitoring their populations is kind of an indirect way for us to monitor the health of a lot of important ecosystems. Wetland habitats where frogs live are very threatened, often by new developments, and frog population numbers in many places are severely threatened by things like disease and habitat loss. So all of these things uh, kind of spark our interest as citizen scientists in monitoring these frog populations. So what does it mean for you to actually participate in the DC Frog Watch chapter? So you are going to become more familiar with our local frog species, and you are going to develop the ability to identify their different calls. So next month on March 19th, participants are invited to join on a guided monitoring session that'll be hosted by some of my colleagues from DOEE as well as our partners at Living Classrooms. This monitoring session will take place at Kingman and Heritage Island, where some of our staff will help facilitate the first monitoring experience. In addition to this, participants are encouraged to do their own field monitoring sessions outside of Kingman in their local wetland environments if possible. All right. So let's go over what the monitoring protocol looks like. So first, you're going to go to your desired location. For next month, that's going to be at Kingman Island, at least 30 minutes after sunset. That is when frogs will start to call usually. After you do that, you are going to get your data sheet and you are going to fill out the site and volunteer information. We're going to go over in more detail what the data sheet looks like on the next couple slides. In addition to filling out that information on the data sheet, you are also going to fill out some specific information about the weather. We'll talk about that more in the coming slides. And then this is important. You are going to stand very still and be perfectly quiet for at least 2 minutes. So this is what's called the acclimation period. And what this does is it kind of neutralizes your presence in the environment. So the presence of people can be disruptive to the frogs and other animals, and they will probably stop calling if a large group of people comes in to their habitat. So that 2 minute period is what's going to allow them to kind of get back to normal. And at that point, you will start your 3 minute observation period where you will be listening for the different calls, the different species, monitoring things like their intensity, which we'll talk about more on the coming slides. After you've recorded all that information, you're also going to include any additional information that may be necessary, such as the site conditions, any other animals you hear, or also if you hear any frog species outside of that 3 minute listening period. Before I go on, are there any questions about the monitoring protocol? All right. I am not seeing any. I will add that next month at the Kingman monitoring session, DOE and Living Classroom staff will help kind of guide this process as well. So that should also help, I think. All right. So all your information you are going to record on your data sheet. So this is what the top half of that data sheet looks like. It's fairly straightforward. You can see the volunteer and site information on the top left side. That includes information such as your name, the site name, the state, so in this case, DC, and then the weather information. So some weather info that we're going to record includes things like the air temperature and the wind speed, which is measured using the Beaufort wind scale. So the Beaufort wind scale is a scale that goes from 0 to 5 to measure the wind. So 0 would be like no wind at all, going all the way up to 5, where the winds are making the trees move. So we are only going to conduct field monitoring if the wind level is at level 3 or below. So level 4 or 5, when the wind gets strong enough to move any paper around, that would be too windy to monitor. It'll impact your ability to hear the calls. So at that point, you might need to come back another time. And if we look at the forecast and we see, 20-mile-per-hour gusts expected in the forecast, we're probably just going to go ahead and reschedule that night. So that's just one piece of weather information we'll include on our data sheets. Any questions about the wind scale? All right, we can move on. So continuing on our data sheet, some other weather info we will include the precipitation during the visit, so whether it's raining or snowing or none of that, as well as some of the precipitation in the preceding the preceding 48 hours. All of these things are going to impact the intensity and presence of frog calls. In addition to that, precipitation of the previous 48 hours, we'll also make a note whether or not the temperature has been above or below freezing in the past 48 hours, because this is, again, something that's going to impact the frog's ability to call. Oh, sorry, got ahead of myself. So after we fill that out and we start doing our actual observation process where we acclimate for at least 2 minutes and then monitor for at least 3 minutes, we're going to record that information down below this section where it says frog and toad observations. And you'll notice we have our species name, which we will identify by listening, as well as our calling intensity. So calling intensity is measured on a scale from 0 to 3. 0 would be there are no frogs or toads being heard. Level 1 would be you can hear distinct individual calls. Level 2 would be you can hear distinct individual calls plus some overlaps. And then level 3 would be a constant, continuous, overlapping chorus of calls. So you will record this information for each individual species that you hear at a site. What questions do we have about any of this stuff so far?
Someone was just
Awesome.
asked.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, in the chat.
Oh, we have a question in the chat. So I had the transcript up. How often is it above a 3? 1 out of every 3 days, 10, 20. The wind. This is about the wind scale, correct? It just depends. I don't think it's too often. I mean, we can go back. Okay. So above a 3 would be 13 miles, 13 miles per hour or higher. So that can happen. But we're going to do our best to avoid that in the scheduling. But that was a good question. Any other questions about the wind scale, the calling intensity, anything regarding the data sheet? All right. There are no questions about the data sheet. We can move on and look at our data submission process. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second here. So I'm going to change tabs. and we are going to go on the FieldScope website. So let me pull this back up. All right. Can everybody see my screen again? So this website, frogwatch.fieldscope.org, is where you are going to go to upload any data that you collect. Now, after the Kingman field monitoring session, I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe our colleagues at DOEE and Living Classrooms are going to be recording that data themselves and uploading it themselves as well. But if you want to upload the data yourself as well, and in addition, if you want to upload any data you record on your own individual monitoring sessions, this is how we'll do it. So we'll go to frogwatch.fieldscope.org. Here, if you were logging in for the first time, you would see a prompt to create an account, which you can do with just making an email and password. But I already am logged in, and this is where we add our data, this little button that says add data. So we go ahead, we click that, and it's going to ask us to select a station. One way we can do that is go on the map and zoom in on DC. Or since I have a previous station, we can select that. So let's pretend that we were monitoring at the marsh on Heritage Island. We can see where that is on the map. After we've selected our site, you can also add new stations if you're doing this on your own. So if you're doing this in your backyard, you can add it on the map and name it yourself and upload it that way. But after we've selected our station, we're going to go ahead and select our date. So let's pretend that I monitored today. This is where I can add my start time and stop time. So let's say I started monitoring at 6:09 a.m. It's not going to work right now, but just pretend. So all that information from the data sheet, we're going to input it right here, including things like the air temperature, the wind, precipitation, etc. And then down here is where we're going to enter our different species information. So let's pretend that while I was doing my observation, I heard an American bullfrog and it was at a level 1. So that's how I enter that. And if I heard another frog species, let's say I heard an American toad as well, I can go to add frog and toad observation. And let's say I heard that at a level 2. So this is all we really need. Any extra stuff, notes, photos, videos, that's optional. If you want to include that, that's fine, but it's not considered necessary. So I'm not actually going to upload this because this is just hypothetical data. But if I were doing this for real, at this point, I would hit save observation and it uploads it just like that. So it's a pretty simple, straightforward process. Everything is basically exactly as it's written out on the data sheet. But are there any questions about that data submission process? All right, I am not seeing any, so I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second while I pull our presentation back up. Alrighty. Great. Can everybody see the presentation again? All right, I'm getting a thumbs up from Alex. I think we're good. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about next month's group monitoring session. The first monitoring session will be on March 19th at Kingman Island at 7:45 p.m. That's half an hour after sunset. You're going to meet at the gate by the RFK parking lot. I believe our colleagues at Living Classrooms are going to be the ones who are disseminating the information on that. But we'll make sure one way or another that everybody gets the exact details on where that gate is, so that nobody gets lost. But in terms of what you need to do, if you want to do the monitoring session, you're going to need to bring a headlamp or flashlight. These are happening, of course, after dark, so you need to bring a light source. It's also recommended that you bring a cell phone. And by we I mean DOEE and Living Classrooms, will provide clipboards, data sheets, as well as writing utensils. Any questions about this part of the process? Alrighty, keep it moving. So next we're going to talk about what different species we can expect to see. So frogs are seasonal breeders, so different species are going to be calling different times of year on different months. So looking ahead and seeing what species we should expect to hear on a given month will just kind of make us a little bit better prepared for each monitoring session. That way we know what calls to practice identifying, because it does take some practice to remember what each individual call sounds like. So we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about what we expect to hear during March. So during March, some of the most common frogs that we expect to hear are the wood frog, the upland chorus frog, the southern leopard frog, the spring peeper, the pickerel frog, the American toad, and the eastern spadefoot. So if we return back to the graph, we might see one or two species from either side of this. We might see, for example, you might hear a Fowler's toad or an eastern cricket frog. It's possible, but oops, there we go. But these are the main ones we should expect to hear. So if you want to practice at home, these are probably the best frog calls for you to listen to. So let's do that now. So the first one we're going to listen to is the wood frog. Play the video. Can everyone hear that?
Nope.
Oh, you can't hear it.
Nope.
All right. Okay, that is good to know. Give me 1 second. I'm going to see if I can fix that. That is good information. Give me 1 second here. All right. We're going to try again. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Thumbs up. Awesome. So that was the wood frog. It has kind of like a quacking or a clucking or a chuckling sort of a sound. Some people compare them to turkey calls. So this is one of those frogs we might hear next month. All right. Another frog species we might hear is the upland chorus frog. So we're going to go ahead and listen to that.
The call of the upland chorus.
So that was the upland chorus frog. They are often compared to the sound of running your fingers over a comb. So kind of like a long creak.
Frog.
We'll move on to another one. So another frog species we might hear next month is the southern leopard frog. So their call is a little more complex. They have that sort of chuckly sort of sound at the start, but that's going to be followed by a different sound, this kind of growling sound that's almost sounds like two balloons being rubbed together. So they have kind of a more complex call. Any questions about any of these frogs? Will the slides be available to review? Yes, we will make sure that everyone has access to the slides. We will also try to make sure that everyone gets access to the recording as well. So thank you for asking. All right, we're going to move on. So this is another one we might hear. This is a very, very distinct call. These are the spring peepers. So as their name would suggest, they have a very distinct peeping sort of sound, and you hear them in the spring. Biologists are not always very creative when they name animals. All right, one more species we can look at that we might hear next month is the pickerel frog. So we heard it a little bit there at the end. They have kind of a snory, almost like a snoring sort of a sound. Takes about 2 seconds. All right. Next one of my favorites is the American toad. They have a very nice little trill. All right, I think this is the last one we're going to look at tonight, is the eastern spadefoot. So that's kind of a more low-pitched grunt. Some people think it sounds like a bleeding sheep. So a lot of fun ways to remember these. So obviously that's a lot of information. That's a lot of different sounds to try to process on short notice. So thankfully we have a nice little website that will help us. I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second while we switch windows. And we go here. All right, let's back up. And we include the sound. Awesome. So this is our toad tester website. And this is a really great tool to practice memorizing your different frog calls. So the way this website works, we click on our frog and we ask ourselves, what species do we think that is? And we click, and we learned that that's a Fowler's toad. We didn't talk about that one. And we can try with a different frog. We ask, what species is this? And we learn that it's a green frog. So this is, make that thing stop. All right. So that's a really useful tool when you're learning these for the first time. And just like everything else we've looked at this evening, we'll make sure that the link to that toad tester website gets shared with everybody in this meeting. So that is all I have for you. But if anybody has any lingering questions, please feel free to ask. How does the scheduling work, or is that set up? Great question. I think we are going to post the event on the Kingman Island website, the same way you should have signed up for the orientation. I don't think that the event is live on the Kingman website. Alex or Lauren, you guys might be able to give more information on that.
I was just about to look.
Gotcha.
No, I haven't posted it yet, but it'll get posted either today or tomorrow. And then as they're scheduled, they'll be posted there.
Perfect. Thank you, Lauren. Much appreciated.
And because you attended this training, you will be on our email list of people we send the events out to.
Marty, I have a question. I had from previous years bookmarked a site. It was dcfrogcalls.webs.com. that was really useful. It had all the 14 species in our specific area. But I see that that site is now defunct. I was wondering if you know anything about that, or whether maybe it moved, or because I do think it was a DC government website of some sort. I don't know if it was through DOEE.
That's a good question. I'm gonna have to look into that. I am not familiar with the website. It kind of rings a bell, maybe, but I will look into that. We can find other resources as well online. There are a lot of different audio guides and things of that nature to use online. So we'll see if we can find a suitable replacement in addition to that Toad Tester website we looked at earlier. But thank you for bringing that to my attention, Regina. All right, some other questions we saw. How soon will there be another event if we can't make March 19th? I believe the plan is to have these once a month. That's a question that I think Alex and Lauren might be able to shed more light on, but it is my understanding that we're going to try to do these once a month.
Yep, once a month, and especially in the springtime. By the time the summer rolls around, those vernal pools start to get a little bit drier and dry out, but definitely in the spring, once a month.
Awesome. Another question we saw, Grant asked, why is the listening time exactly 3 minutes? I'm not involved in creating the protocols, but my educated guess would be it's just to standardize the listening time, because that way if someone is listening at a site for an hour and they hear a bunch of frogs, and someone else is listening at a site for 5 seconds and they don't hear any frogs, that's not very good data. So I think it's just kind of controlling and giving more specific data set, but that's a very good question. Is DOEE the only frog watching organization in DC, or are there multiple? That is a great question. I recall in previous years we had set up a Facebook group, or rather Living Classrooms, I think, set up a DC FrogWatch Facebook group. I'm not sure if that's still active. We can look into that, and if people are interested, we can share that information with the people on this call. But as far as I know, DOEE, we are the only organization formally participating in FrogWatch in DC, as far as I know. Oh yes, Michelle, thank you for sharing. Montgomery County has a good guide as well. What else we have? Is it helpful to do multiple 3-minute listening sessions in one visit, or best to do one 3-minute session at night, then come back another time? That's a good question. So I can speak on experience about the Kingman Island field monitoring sessions, the way we've done those in the past. We've done 3-minute listening sessions at multiple different locations. So we might listen at one marsh on Heritage Island, and then another one on Kingman, and then move somewhere near the river. So doing multiple listening sessions at different kind of discrete areas within the area, I think, is one way we've done things in the past. So that's, as far as I know, one of the better ways to do that. All right. Are we supposed to go on our own in between the scheduled walks? If you would like to do so, you are encouraged to do so, but no one's gonna shun you or anything, or tell you you can't come to future Kingman monitoring sessions. So if you want to just go to those, feel free. Is there an iNaturalist project for this, or just the website? That is a good question. I'm only familiar with the FieldScope website. I wouldn't be surprised if iNaturalist had its own version of this, but I cannot say for sure. That being said, I know the information that we collect from the Kingman monitoring sessions, those are going to be reported on FieldScope. So I can say that with confidence. But that's a good question. How do you monitor the populations of frogs that don't make noise during the month? As part of FrogWatch, there's not really much you can do there. I can tell you that DOEE, we do have a herpetologist on staff, and part of his job is to monitor all kinds of reptile and amphibian populations, including the ones that aren't calling. So with FrogWatch as a citizen science project, it's mostly dedicated to listening, and therefore we're kind of just depends on what kind of frogs are calling that month. But that being said, DOE does have other ways to keep an eye on amphibian populations, even when they're not, in breeding season. Where other than Kingman is a good spot to monitor? Great question. So in general, you're going to want to do your monitoring at your local wetlands. So if you have any ponds or anything like that, frogs are going to lay their eggs in the water since they're amphibians. So if you have like any wetland areas, ponds, marshy, swampy places near where you live, that's a pretty good spot to monitor, I would say. How should we deal with closed Kingman Island, etc. on non-guided days? That is a great question about Kingman. Kingman is closed after dark, so I don't think you would be permitted to do monitoring sessions there. On non-guided days, we're able to open the island for these specific programs because it is a special event. But in general, Kingman, you're probably not going to go outside of those guided events. So if you have another area near you that is open after dark, I would recommend visiting those instead. Does Rock Creek count as a wetland? Certain parts of it definitely should. Anywhere where you're close to the creek, right? So any areas where there would be bodies of water where the frogs could lay their eggs is generally a good bet. So Rock Creek Park should definitely have some good spots. All right. Does the temperature affect if frogs are more or less vocal? It is my understanding that it should. My understanding is that frogs are going to be generally more vocal when it's warmer, but I could be wrong about that. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and stop recording now as well.